NETHERTON WRITERS presents You Just Sit Around and Cry Then, written by Will Taylor. It was September 1916 and we were in France, stuck in the middle of the horrific Battle of the Somme. It had been raging for months. The cost in human lives was extravagantly wasteful, all for the sake of a line on a map. Hundreds of thousands had paid the price. Very little blood-soaked ground had been lost or gained. The screaming shells were continuously falling from both sides, further mutilating the horrendous body parts that were strewn everywhere. It was a scene from a sickeningly gruesome nightmare. The rain and the shells had churned the place into a horrifying muddy hell. The hundreds of bomb craters were full of dismembered limbs, half buried in the thick mud and blood-stained pools of rain. The howlings of the wounded, stranded in no man's land, was never silenced by the bombs. Men were reduced to crying, snivelling and whimpering wrecks. Sitting deep in the bottom of a filthy trench was Private John Mannion of the King's Own Regiment. He was hunched over with his head in his hands. A rat ran over his mud-covered boots and he tried to kick it, but he was too slow. The rat scurried off into a hole in the trench wall. "The war to end all wars. That's what we were told when we were called up," he said out loud. Too loud. He looked around to see if anybody was listening to him, but everyone was lost in their own world, sitting in silence, waiting for orders. There was little justice here. If you didn't go over the top, you would be shot for cowardice. If you did go over the top, you were cannon fodder for enemy machine guns. Worst of all, if you were injured, you were left where you fell. The injured were used as bait, and they killed any men who tried to save them. Some men hung on for days, screaming out in agony for their loved ones, crying and howling. It was a harrowing nightmare. The reek of sulphur and rotting flesh hung in the air, wildly grasping at your nose and throat. The stench of piss and shit never left the endless dirty trench. The reek of absolute fear was unmistakable. The knowledge that your death was inevitable weighed heavily on your heart and mind. A couple of thousand men, waiting for the whistle to blow, which meant over the top to meet your fate. Hero or coward, dead or alive. We had been told not to run, but walk in a straight line, shoulder to shoulder, in line with everybody else, walking towards the German trenches while they fired at us with machine guns. Dave Jones, a private in the infantry, spoke. "Got a light, mate?" John looked up to see a familiar friendly face. "Hey, what?" "Got a light, mate?" "Oh God, sorry, I was elsewhere." "Of course, mate." John reached into his pocket, fumbled around and pulled out a Zippo lighter, which he lit and held up to Dave. Dave pulled hard on the cigarette in his mouth and offered the packet to John, who took one and said cheers. "What time do you think we're going over?" Dave asked. "Don't know," John replied, "and I don't really care, to be honest. The longer it takes, the longer I'm here. I hate this bloody place, and there's no way I'm ever coming back here again. Ever. The lads are saying that there might be 2 weeks off the front line coming our way soon. What do you think?" Dave went on. John shook his head. "The only way we're getting away from this fucking stinking trench is going that way," he said, pointing up at the trench wall. "No, that's not the only way. I'm getting out of here. It can't be. There's got to be more than this. There's so much more I've got to do. Like getting married, having children, buying a house. I don't know. Like learning to swim, riding a horse. There's so many things I want to do," Dave went on. "Dave, sorry mate, but the chances of getting out of here are slim, to say the least. Look how many boys we've seen die here. I've lost count, and you know that. We don't make new friends anymore because of it. It all hurts too much. You know that too." Dave sat down and let out a big sigh. I know, he said. He looked up and saw John silently crying. His tears left clean pink lines as they cut through the mud stuck to his face. The truth about what John had just said hit him like a ton of bricks, as if he hadn't heard all this stuff before. It was all everyone ever talked about, but this time it seemed to carry a weight that he didn't expect. The thought of never seeing his home, his family, and England ever again. Suddenly he felt the pain so strong it made him wince, and he realised just how much he missed everything that he had ever known and dared to hope to see again. The tears felt warm as they ran down his cheeks. "Dave, you just sit around and cry then," John said. "But we don't have the luxury. You will be shot either way, so it's a lose-lose situation. But chin up. Hopefully you might not feel anything. Let's hope it's quick and clean." The distant sound of whistles was repeated down the trench as the order to be ready was given. All the men stood up and made themselves ready to climb out of the trench. The order to fix bayonets and to be ready to climb was shouted throughout the trench. The sound of the whistles being blown all at the same time was deafening, and the order to go over the top was given. The men were screaming and shouting as they frantically climbed up and out of the trench. The officers stood at the bottom of the trench with pistols drawn, waiting to shoot anybody that wasn't moving forward. The enemy machine guns opened up like a dragon spitting fire, cutting through the lines of soldiers. All hell was let loose, and we were in hell.